Hello and welcome back to another GiantSlayer TFT ranked meta video. Our analysts are here to go through the 11-10 meta for each stage of the game. We'll be covering each aspect of the meta, including stages, items, and compositions. With a lot to cover, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our GiantSlayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Let's begin by covering the early game, starting with the opening carousel. Set 5 Steam of flexible item openings continued into 11-10, as you can find a use for every single component. This is because on average you get 2 components from the PvE rounds, followed by the choice of either a shadow component or regular component on 2-2. The armory has made it a lot easier to flex your opening component, so you're less likely to be in a position where you can't make any useful items. As for which components to grab, it comes down to a few decisions. One is personal playstyle. Are you the type of player that wants to force meta compositions? In that case, look for either a sword, cloak, glove, or bow to give you starting components for either a skirmisher comp or Draven. Maybe you're open to playing flexibly but favor Mordekaiser because of how good he is at stabilizing level 7 boards. If that's the case, grab a belt, glove, or rod. There's plenty of other choices you can make, such as a tier open to potentially play Spellweavers or Assassins. Another factor to consider is how comfortable you are with playing component duplicates. Double bow may point towards slamming early RFC, which can be used on several champions, some of which you may not be comfortable on. By far the best and safest opening is to go defensive components like belt or chain vest. Getting 2 belts early is a flexible opening because Warmogs is an all-around solid frontline item for a lot of different champions. Especially early game, it's great on Knights, Aatrox, and Gragas. Later, it can be given to most frontline champions, with Mordekaiser and Garen being 2 of the best. So what component you take has a lot of factors to consider. If you're unsure what the best option is, we recommend trying for a belt. You could go on and on about the beginning carousel, but let's switch over and talk about Stage 1. Unfortunately, the early game took a hit after they nerfed multiple one-cost champions. This means it's easy to get stuck in a bad position early game if you low-roll your shops and PvE drops. But there are ways to try and mitigate weak openings. The best and most obvious is to make sure you're buying pairs. Even weaker champions like Lissandra and Vayne are still going to provide a bit of power to your board as 2-star units. Of course, you can try to avoid buying them and instead aim for stronger opening units. Some of the best one costs to look for are Gragas with Kha'Zix, Kalista, and Aatrox, Udyr with any frontline, or if you're lucky, 2 other skirmishers. Early skirmishers are by far the best opening, but it all depends on what you're finding in your shop. Basically, try to 2-star an early carry to give items to, or a frontliner to give defensive items to. What you get from your loot orbs also determines how well your early game will go. There are a lot of variations. Even among the standard opening of 2 items in gold, that gold can be a mixture of champions. Generally, you're going to sell champions you get from loot orbs to buy from your shop, but it's worthwhile to play around any 3-cost units that drop. Practically every early 3-cost can be useful in some way. Zyra and Ashe open the door to early Draconic, Lee Sin helps with hitting 3 skirmishers, and same with Nidalee. Riven, while not that great of a unit later on in the game, does well early, especially as an item holder. Whichever 3 costs you get, just play around them the best you can, and you'll end up with a strong opening board. Let's now move into Stage 2. In the current meta, it's important to save health. This is because the pace of the game is rather fast, and players will hit power spikes as early as Stage 3. If you play a weak early game board and take a lot of damage through Stage 2, even if it's on a loss streak for gold, and don't stabilize in Stage 3, you're going to easily be below 50 health by wolves. While it's possible to play from a loss streak and low health, you're going to have an easier time in the mid and late game if you save health early on. We recommend shying away from loss streak openings because of this, unless you're well practiced with the playstyle. For everyone else though, the goal in Stage 2 is to play your strongest board. There's 2 easy ways to do this. First is to level, usually on 2-2 or 2-1 if you've got a really good opening board. Leveling gives you additional options on your board and generally mitigates losses that you may take, meaning you lose less health overall. It also means the chances of finding higher cost units in your shop, which are great ways to stabilize early. The other way to prevent too much health loss early game is by slamming items. If you have an item to make before the 2-2 armory stage, that's fine to do, such as Warmogs or Bloodthirster. Otherwise, it's a good idea in general to wait until the armory round before making a decision, just so that you have more options to work with. We already covered a few items you can make early game, but to reiterate, the best opening item in the current meta is going to be Warmogs. Other than that, try to 2-star what you can on your board. Make sure you're scouting as well so you're not getting caught off guard by players running Kha'Zix or an early Thresh. On 2-5, the goal will be to level to 5, though you may need to pre-level at the end of 2-3 if you're not able to make 10 gold, or if you have enough gold to pre-level and still have 10 gold left over. Then it's smooth sailing to Krugs. Overall, the goal in Stage 2 is to play your strongest board with the intent to win streak. Doing so not only boosts your economy, but also keeps your health high going into the mid-game. With that, we're into the mid-game beginning with Stage 3. Stage 3 is where you're most likely going to lose a lot of health. This is because once players hit level 6 on 3-2, it's become common to roll for specific power spikes. The most notable is 6 skirmishers with or without jacks. Playing for skirmishers is by far the easiest way to play Stage 3 and 4 in the current meta because all of them are quite good at that point of the game. With a proper item carry, it's easy to win streak with. Another common champion to see rolled for is Mordekaiser, though it's more likely the players will roll for him on level 7. But it still happens on level 6, especially for anyone that low-rolled early game and needs to stabilize in Stage 3. Mordekaiser with another Dragon Slayer, Legionnaire, and items like Warmogs or Hextech Gunblade is going to win most Stage 3 rounds. In both cases, there's a lot of luck as to whether you hit certain champions or not. If you have high health, you can try to skip Stage 3 or better roll down at level 7, but if you're below 60, it may be a good idea to roll. Either look to roll on 3-2 to try to stabilize, or wait to level to 7 on 3-5 and roll there. It's risky to do this because not hitting likely means you're dead in the water, but getting low on health often means you have to roll. Let's move on to Stage 4, which is where most players will be leveling to 7 on 4-1 and then rolling. Players that rolled and hit prior to 4-1 likely don't even need to spend gold, but everyone else will want to roll here. Even if you're high rolling, it's better to roll on 7 because you want to get to level 8 and not be stuck without a solid 4-cost carry. We'll cover what to look for soon, but first let's talk about how much you should roll. In general, roll as much as you're able to until you have a solid board. This means you found a carry to give items to and a solid front line. Once you hit that, you can stop rolling and try to build your economy back up throughout the rest of Stage 4. If you were lucky and hit early, or naturally hit a lot of good champions prior to 4-1, you can play for an early level 8. By early, we mean between 4-5 and 5-1. But keep in mind that level 8 isn't going to be much better for hitting 4 costs, and there's not a lot of late game 5-cost champions that are worth playing for. So in general, we recommend rolling a lot on 7 before saving to go to 8. Before we move on to the next stage of the game, let's cover a few mid-game compositions. The current meta heavily favors 3 builds: Skirmishers, Draven, and Mordekaiser. Skirmishers are easy to play and can come online early since you can hit 6 of them during Stage 3. Jax then becomes the main carry of the composition, with additional champions like Mordekaiser being playable if you want to run 6 Skirmishers and 4 Dragon Slayer. Or you can add in splash traits like Ironclad or Mystic. Draven and Mordekaiser often go hand in hand, though you don't have to play them together. Draven wants Legionnaire, good items, and a front line. Forgotten can help mitigate not having great DPS items for Draven. Mordekaiser, on the other hand, can be played in a multitude of compositions. Just make sure you have at least one other Dragon Slayer and one other Legionnaire. Best in slot items for Mordekaiser are Warmogs, Caustic Quicksilver, and either Jeweled Gauntlet or Hextech Gunblade. As we said, those are the most common playstyles in the current meta, but there are other options. Brand with 4 Spellweavers and Hecarim as a frontline has risen in popularity. The goal is to roll for Brand 3, Hecarim 3, Victor 3, and Sejuani 3 on level 7. Another build using Brand is Vel'Koz with Spellweavers. This also uses Abomination, so the goal is to find Vel'Koz with 4 Spellweaver and 3 Abomination. Assassins are also viable with either LeBlanc or Katarina as the carry. The key to them is items, as you need Blue Buff and Shadow Infinity Edge for both, though preferably Dark Blue Buff for LeBlanc. In either case, the level 7 board should be 4 Assassins with 3 Coven. Morgana is the front line, so try to get at least a Guardian Angel on her if possible. Lastly, if you high roll an early Kayle, you can attempt to play a Kayle Knight build. Basically just throw a bunch of Knights in front of Kayle and hope that they stall the fight long enough for her. Besides that, there are a few other potential builds, but overall there's a lack of diversity in the current meta. By far, the top 3 most common are Skirmishers, a mixture of Draven and Mordekaiser, and Vel'Koz. With that, let's move into the late game. Late game basically means leveling to 8 sometime between 4-5 and 5-3 and staying there to roll for upgrades. There's not a lot of emphasis on going to level 9 unless you're clearly in a good position to do so, as most of the time spending gold on your board is better. 5-cost champions are quite weak in the current meta, the best being Viego, especially since he's a skirmisher and pairs well with Draven. Kindred is also a solid option if you're able to fit them in. All the other 5 costs are difficult to use properly, though Garen is a must-have for any players running magic-focused compositions. Because of how weak 5 costs are right now, it means playing the early and mid-game well is far more important. Once you get better at saving health during those parts of the game, you'll end up placing more consistently in the top 4. One last aspect we want to touch on is positioning. While positioning is always important, as well as scouting, we want to be honest by saying there's a lot of luck right now in how you position your board. This is because most players are running similar boards, so it's really hard to position around different players. For example, if you have a Mordekaiser 2, you want to avoid placing it in front of Trundles and Dravens. But if there's 4 other players running either Draven or Trundle, positioning properly every round is literally a dice roll. Same thing with playing against Diana and Viego. Sometimes you're just going to guess wrong and get punished. Vel'Koz is another example, as you want your carry to be on the same side as Vel'Koz, but multiple players may be running him, so it's difficult to always be on the correct side. The best thing to keep in mind is to do your best at scouting and play the odds. If 2 of the 3 potential players you'll be against are positioned to the left, go to the right side. You may end up wrong, but playing the odds is going to help you get through the mid-game until you can begin positioning for individual players. Just always be scouting and repositioning as best you can. And that's all for today's video, folks. It's not a secret that this meta is not liked by a majority of players. But with Set 5 being new, it's expected occasional metas like this will happen. Try to be kind to the developers as they're doing their best to balance the game, and if you really need to, you can always take a break until the next patch. Let us know in the comment section below what you're looking forward to most in patch 11.11. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.